Hi, this is Jeff Mann, and I'm going to be producing another episode for my video project. And this is going to be episode 12, and I'm going to be discussing this particular video that was recently produced by the AMG instructors. In the last few weeks, this is now in August 2026, the AMG instructors have produced a number of videos on the topic of the trail forearm motion during the late downswing between P6 and impact. And they obviously have strong opinions now. This latest video, which I haven't analyzed, is a video where Sean Webb and Mike Renato are claiming that this image on the left, which shows Sean Webb demonstrating a trail arm release action, he says this is a myth. This release move doesn't exist in good swings. And Mike Renato and Sean Webb believe that the optimum way is to perform a trail arm action like this. So if we look at this, what they perceive to be the correct way to move the trail arm and trail forearm during the late downswing is, you'll notice that Sean Webb is internally rotating his trail arm to such a degree that you can't see his elbow pit. And what you can see here in terms of his forearm is you can see the dorsal aspect of his forearm, the back of his forearm. And when you look at his image at impact, it looks like his trail palm is facing the ground, which to me means that it's very likely that his trail forearm is significantly pronated. When you look at this image on the left, which he says doesn't happen in good golf swings, in pro golfers, notice the way he's moving his trail upper arm. You'll notice that it's neutral here, so that his trail antecubital fossa, which is the medical term for the elbow pit, is facing the camera. And if you look at his trail forearm, you can see you're looking at the ventral aspect. That's, the hairless part of your forearm is facing the camera. And to be able to see his hand like it exists here, where it looks more behind the club handle and partially under the club handle, you have to be supinated. You'll notice that if you look at this red line here, the trail upper arm and the trail forearm are more or less in line, which means that his trail upper arm is not internally rotated in the manner that you can see on the right side. Now, they believe that this is the correct way to perform a golf swing, and I harbor a totally opposite opinion. I have never seen a pro golfer look like this between P6 and impact, and I believe that if you perform a golf swing like this, you're in for a lot of trouble. Now, to express my opinion, I'm going to go to the next image, and I'll share this tab with you. So what I've done here in image 1, I've copied what Sean Webb believes is a myth. He says this doesn't happen in pro golfers. So here I have Tiger Woods, and you can see he looks to me identical to Sean Webb. Notice that his trail upper arm is neutral. You can see his antecubital fossa, and I've drawn a blue line down the middle of his antecubital fossa, and you can see the ventral aspect of his forearm. Notice I've drawn a red line over his trail lower forearm's lower radial bone, and it is rotated clockwise relative to the blue line, which means that he's supinated. And that would account for the fact, if you look at his trail palm, relative to the club handle, it's partially under the club handle and partially behind the club handle. In image 3, this is Scottie Scheffler at the same position, which is roughly somewhere between P6.3 and P6.5, comparable to here, where it looks like Sean Webb is at the P6.3 position. And you'll notice that Scottie Scheffler looks like Sean Webb in this image. His trail upper arm is neutral. His elbow pit is facing the camera. His trail forearm is supinated, and his trail palm is behind the club handle and partially under the club handle. And finally, here is an image of Sean Webb himself from another swing video that he did. And in this one, you can see he looks identical to Scottie Scheffler and Tiger Woods. His upper arm is neutral. I've drawn a line down the middle of his antecubital fossa, and his antecubital fossa is facing the camera. The red line is rotated clockwise relative to the blue line, which means he's supinated. And if you look at his trail palm, it's partially behind the club handle and partially under the club handle. So this, to me, contradicts what Sean Webb is saying. He says this look, this performance of the trail arm motion doesn't happen in professional golfers. And it obviously happened in his swing here. So what was he doing in this swing from one of his videos? So I'm going to go to the next image, and I'll share this image with you. So this is an image from a swing video which I discussed in episode number 10, where Sean Webb was demonstrating a perfect example of a golf swing from my perspective. I praised this swing action very highly in episode number 10. I said that this is representative of what one sees in a pro golfer. And he was performing a lead arm only swing. And then what he did, he first did a lead arm only swing without the trail arm, and then he put his trail arm in a position where he called it a ghost trail arm or ghost trail hand, where he just put his flat palm, trail palm, against the back of the club handle with his fingers outstretched. So at the P6 position here, you'll notice that his trail palm was behind the club handle and partially under the club handle. By P6.5, you'll notice that he still has a look where his antecubital fossa is facing the camera. His trail upper arm is neutral, it's not internally rotated, and his trail forearm is still supinated. And if you look at his trail palm, it's still partially behind the club handle, and under the club handle, it's not facing the ground. And by the time he gets to impact, he has the same look, a neutral trail upper arm, a supinated trail forearm. You can clearly see that his antecubital fossa, trail antecubital fossa, is facing the camera. It hasn't rotated counterclockwise in the manner Sean Webb is now saying is the correct way to perform it. So why wasn't he doing it here? And my explanation, and it's the entire basis of my criticism, is that what I believe that Sean Webb is doing in this particular golf swing action is he's performing a lead arm swing action where the trail arm performs a secondary role where it synergistically helps him to perform the lead arm swing action. That in his lead arm swing action between P6 and P7, note what he's doing. So between P6 and P6.5, he's starting to release the club. You'll notice that the back of his hand's still more or less facing the camera. But between P6.5, as he completes the release of the club, he rotates the back of his lead hand counterclockwise using a lead forearm supinatory action, and he needs that to square the face. And I believe in this particular swing that Sean Webb is performing a lead arm swing action. Now I'm going to go to the next image, and I'll share this tab with you. And this is another swing video produced by the AMG instructors, dating back quite a bit. And in this particular video, which I would highly recommend that you view it, I will provide a link in the info section below my video so that you just follow the link to view it. If the link doesn't work, you just need to type this title here into YouTube search engine and you should be able to find it. And you definitely need to watch this video. So what they're discussing in this particular video is they say that in order to square the face consistently, you can't do it through a body action. And there are a surprising number of developing golfers, student golfers, who think that they could just turn the body towards the target and then the club face would be square. And what the AMG instructors are saying in this video, that's impossible. That what you need to square the face is a lead arm action, and they describe all the elements required. So what they describe is, here he is at the P6 position here, and it says to square the face, you first have to release the club, which means your lead arm, which now is in a position of radial deviation, needs to move towards ulnar deviation. In other words, you need to uncock your lead wrist. The second thing they describe to square the face is you have to rotate the back of your lead hand counterclockwise via a lead forearm supinatory action, and that will cause the club shaft to twist counterclockwise about its longitudinal axis between P6.5 and P7, and that allows you to square the face. They also mention that the third component is to move your lead wrist from being flexed in the late downswing to becoming less flexed through impact. In other words, it's moving towards an extension. So if you watch that video, you're going to see the following. So I'm going to the next image, and I'll share this image. So here is an image that I captured from the video where Sean Webb was doing an air swing, demonstrating the motion of what he had described. He said, what I have to do is as I release the club, I have to uncock my lead wrist, going from radial deviation towards ulnar deviation here. There he looks at P6.5. In this blurred image, he's at P6.8. So he's releasing the club due to a lead wrist uncocking action. He then says to square the face by impact, he's going to rotate his lead arm in a supinatory direction. But what I want to point out now is look what he's doing with his trail arm. Notice here I've drawn a blue line down the middle of his trail antecubital fossa and a red line over his trail forearm's lower radial bone. You can see that his upper arm is neutral. His elbow pit, the antecubital fossa, is facing the camera, facing the ball target line, and it's moving parallel to his functional swing plane. And you can see his trail forearm is supinated. So in this image, which is from another one of his videos, he's doing the identical golf swing action which he claims doesn't happen in a professional golf swing. And I believe it has to happen this way because what he's doing in this demonstration he's performing a lead arm swing in action. So I'm now going to another image, and I'll share this image with you. And I'm going to analyze Scottie Scheffler's swing. I believe and I often use Scottie Scheffler as an example because he obviously has a perfect golf swing. I mean, he is, many people regard as the equivalent of Tiger Woods, if not even better, in terms of his success on the PGA Tour. And I've analyzed his golf swing multiple times to show why I believe it's such a perfect example of a PGA Tour quality golf swing. Now, what I'm going to describe is the motion of his lead arm in particular, but I'll also talk about what he's doing with his trail arm. So here in image 1, he's at the P4 position, and this red spline path represents his hand arc path. And you can see that at P4, Scottie Scheffler has a very steep lead arm. If you look at his trail arm, he has roughly a 90-degree bend in his trail elbow at his P4 position. Now, image 2 is at the P4 5 position, and you'll notice his lead hand is moving down the hand arc path and therefore pulling the club handle in that same direction. You'll notice that his trail upper arm maintains a 90-degree bend. Here in image 3, he's at the P4 position, and he still has a 90-degree bend in his trail arm. And you'll notice that his club shaft relative to his lead arm has a roughly 90-degree angle, and it's very similar to the amount that he had at his end backswing. So he's retaining his club head lag angle between P4 and P5. And I believe that one factor that the trail upper arm plays a role in allowing him to keep his club head lag angle is that he's adducting his upper arm very fast towards his trail shirt seam while maintaining a 90-degree bend in his trail elbow. And I think that helps him to keep the angle between his club shaft and his lead arm at 90 degrees. I want you to notice also that his hands are moving away from the target between P4 and P5. And at P5, his lead hand is at the furthest distance from the target, even though between P4 and P5, notice how much he's rotating his pelvis towards the target. So his body is moving to the target, and yet his lead hand is moving away from the target. And the reason is simply due to the fact that if you move your trail hand from here, which looks like the 11:30 o'clock position, to where it's parallel to the ground, to the 9 o'clock position, that is the point at which your club head hand arc path is at its greatest. Now let's look what happens between P5 in image 3 and P4 5.5 in image 4. You'll notice that obviously his lead hand is now moving closer to the target, but I want you to notice something very important. Look at his lead hand at P5.5 here. Notice it is no closer to the target than it was at his end backswing position. In other words, this is very important to understand, is that although his hand arc path is moving away from the target simply due to the fact that his lead arm is moving in this direction between P4 and P5, eventually it moves towards a target between P5 and P5.5, but it's still well outside his trail thigh at P5.5. And what makes that biomechanically possible is the way he moves his trail upper arm. Notice here that his trail upper arm is neutral, maybe slightly externally rotated, which angles his forearm away from the target, like that. And that motion of the trail upper arm allows him to make his hand arc path in this area between P5 and P5.5 more U-shaped. In other words, his hands are not moving straight down to the ball. They're moving in what I call a U-shaped path. And you can see even after P5.5 all the way to impact, which is here, it has this characteristic U-shaped appearance. And keep this in mind because I'm going to discuss this in detail later as to why it's so important. I'm going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this image of Scottie Scheffler. So we're now looking at the same golf swing action from a down the line viewing perspective. Here in image 1 is Scottie Scheffler at his P4 position, and I've drawn a red line parallel to the back of his lead hand and the watch face area of his trail upper arm, and I've drawn a yellow line parallel to his trail palm. Now, Scottie Scheffler uses a weak lead hand grip and a weak trail hand grip, which means that during his entire downswing action, the two palms are always facing each other across the club handle. In other words, they're always parallel to each other. Now, if you look at his club shaft here in image 1, when he's at the end backswing position, you could see that his club shaft's in line with his forearm. And I always refer to that alignment as an intact left forearm flying wedge alignment, which means he has a geometrically flat left wrist. Here he is at P5 in image 2, and he still has an intact left forearm flying wedge. In other words, the club shaft is still in line with his lead lower forearm's radial bone, and he still therefore has a geometrically flat left wrist. But the difference between P4 and P5 is that he's starting to shallow the club shaft, and you can see that this red line is obviously shallower than it was at P4. And therefore, his trail palm must also be becoming more horizontal relative to the ground. Here at the P5 position, you'll notice that his club shaft is still in line with his radial bone. So during the entire early mid downswing between P4 and P5.5, he maintains an intact left forearm flying wedge and a geometrically flat left wrist. Notice that this red line drawn across the back of his lead hand is much more horizontal. So that is due to the fact that he's performing a club face squaring action. Now, his trail palm, represented by this yellow line, remains parallel to his red line throughout the entire downswing. It has to, because his two palms are facing each other across the club handle. Now, to get the yellow line, which you can say in image 1, which is steep, by P5 it's more horizontal, less steep, and here it's considerably more horizontal as he shallows the club shaft. That's only biomechanically possible by performing a trail or forearm supinatory motion. So I'm going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this image. So image 1 is at the P5.5 position. Image 2 is roughly at the P6.2, 6.3 position. and image 3 is very close to impact. I've drawn this red line and I've traced the motion of his hosel of the club during the downswing. And you'll notice that what happens to Scottie Scheffler, as it happens in the majority of professional golfers who want to hit a straight shot, they are going to shallow the club shaft down to their desired functional swing plane by about P5.5, P5.8, somewhere around there. And then from about this position to impact, they're going to keep the club shaft on their functional swing plane, as you can see Scottie Scheffler is doing here. Now, while he does that, what does he have to do to accomplish that in terms of lead arm motion and trail arm motion? So you'll notice that here he's starting to uncock his lead wrist to release the club. So by P6.3, he obviously doesn't have a 90-degree lag angle between his lead arm and the club shaft. He's releasing the club. But notice that the club shaft is still in line with his radial bone and he still has a geometrically flat left wrist. To achieve this release on the functional swing plane, he obviously has to move his lead wrist from being radially deviated towards becoming more ulnar deviated. At the same time, if you look at his radial bone here in image 1 and then in image 2, he has to rotate his lead lower forearm counterclockwise to a small degree while he's releasing the club to ensure that the club shaft remains on his functional swing plane. It's hard to see in this image what he's doing with the trail forearm, but I will show you by looking at face-on images that for him to do that during this P5.5 to P6.3 position, his trail forearm will have to move into a greater degree of trail forearm supination. Here he is towards impact. You can see, if you look, his club shaft still on his functional swing plane. And for Scottie Scheffler, he gets his functional swing plane is his elbow plane. If you look at his lead arm, you can see his radial bone had continued to rotate counterclockwise between P6.3 and impact. And he's obviously moved towards a greater degree of ulnar deviation of his lead wrist to get to impact. I'm now going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this image with you. So this is in image 1, Scottie Scheffler at the P6 position. Image 2 is at P6.5. Image 3 is at impact. Notice that when he gets to the P6 position, his upper arm, trail upper arm, looks slightly externally rotated, which angles his forearm slightly away from the target. Notice that you can see his elbow pit, the antecubital fossa, and notice that his trail forearm is supinated. Here at P6.5, you can see he's releasing the club, which requires that he uncocks his lead wrist so that it moves from radial deviation towards ulnar deviation. Notice he has to keep his forearm supinated, right? His antecubital fossa is still facing the camera. His trail forearm is still supinated. If you look at his trail upper arm, it looks now neutral, so that his upper arm and forearm is neutral. And here at impact, it looks neutral. At no time did Scottie Scheffler internally rotate his arm, upper arm, in the way that Sean Webb says you have to do. And you can see that his trail forearm is supinated. I'm now going to stop sharing images and I'm going to go and turn on my camera. Excuse me. I have to take a sip of water. I find in Salt Lake City, where I live, the air is very dry, and when I talk and give these video presentations, my throat gets dry and I start coughing and spluttering and so on. Now, what I'm going to do now is go into a lot of detail as I usually do. So let's consider what Sean Webb was saying. So here is Sean Webb at his P6 position, and if you looked at him, if he shuttered the club shaft, he had to have a certain degree of supination at this position where you could see his trail elbow pit at his P6 position, and the ventral aspect of his trail arm would be facing the sky, facing the ball target line. But he said that from here to impact, you had to do the following. I'll demonstrate it without a club. He said you need to internally rotate your trail upper arm like this motion. And look what happens by the time he gets to impact. You can't see his antecubital fossa anymore, right? You can only see the back of his forearm. And if you do this motion and you come to impact, where is the palm facing? It's facing the ground. So consider this. In the image that they demonstrated, they said, this is what it looks like. I'm going to stand further away so you can see more of my motion. They look like this. He demonstrated that. And I'm thinking, wow. He comes into impact with not forward shaft in, the club head is closer to the target than his hands. And he's got a bent lead wrist. And this hand is pronated with the palm facing the ground. I'll do it again, like that. Now he said, well, in a real golf swing, you turn in very fast, opening your pelvis, and then when you do that motion, you won't look quite like that. But no matter what I do, if I duplicate what Sean Webb, no matter how much I turn fast, well, yeah, I could get maybe to impact with a bit of forward shaft lean if I time this like that. But now, how do you square the face? See how the club face is facing the ground? So, Sean Webb, at the end of the video, to justify this concept of doing this internal rotation of the trail upper arm in this manner, said, well, if you were hitting a golf ball with just this arm, so you need to watch the last few minutes of the video, he performed an action where he said, you just swing it like this across your body, right? And he said, well, that's all you need to do. Why would you think of doing this? He said, it doesn't make sense to do that. Now, from my perspective, I encourage you to try this with a real golf club and a real ball on the ground. And then try to see if you could get to impact and hit the ball with forward shaft lean and with a club face that is not closed, that is square. And I find it very difficult, particularly if I allow my trail wrist to straighten. So if I was performing a trail arm golf swing where I didn't have a lead arm, the way I would do it is as follows. I would be very conscious of the need to come in with forward shaft lean, see, like that, which means I would keep my wrist extended into impact. The other thing, I wouldn't do it like this. I would make sure that my antecubital fossa is facing the sky and facing the ball target line. And then I would swing into impact like this. Notice when you try this at home, this is such an easier way to come in with forward shaft lean and come in with a square face. I believe if you do this, you put yourself at risk of coming into impact with the club shaft bypass in your hands and with the club face closing too much. I just can't conceive that Sean Webb and Mike Renato say this is the optimum way to move the trail arm in the late downswing between P6 and impact. And I'm thinking, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, the reason why it doesn't particularly make sense to me is they're just talking about as if this is the trail arms perform in the swing. And Mike Renato and Sean Webb talking about a right arm throw like this. And I'm thinking, why are you throwing your right arm if you're a lead arm swinger? So I believe that the majority of professional golfers perform the swing in this manner. So they swing their lead arm down, they release the club, and if they use a weak or neutral grip, they supinate the lead lower form to square the face. So this provides the power, the control, and that's the way I picture a professional golf swing. So I'm saying, okay, you do have a trail arm. And you could say, well, why would you want to throw it? What does it mean to throw it? So I've already talked about this topic in previous episodes, where I put forward the idea based on scientific research from Sasha McKenzie and Dr. Young-Hoo Kwan, that they have researched the swing and shown that the trail arm, tail palm, is not pushing the club shaft during the late downswing into impact. Or they argue that it can barely keep up. So if the trail arm has any function, I believe that the function of the trail arm is subservient to the motion of the lead arm. So I'm going to demonstrate Scottie Scheffler's swing, and I would encourage you to duplicate it. So Scottie Scheffler uses a weak lead hand grip like this, a one knuckle lead hand grip like that. So from P4, I can't get as far back as Scottie Scheffler, so I'm going to presume here. You start to shallow the club shaft. And to do that, the back of your geometrically flat left wrist has to become more horizontal relative to the ground due to a pronatory lead forearm motion, like this, as you shallow the club shaft like Scottie Scheffler. During that time, he keeps a 90-degree angle to about here before it releases. Then let's go to the beginning of the release phase between P5.5 and P6.3. Watch this. It's absolutely critical that you understand this point, because this is important. He shallowed his club shaft, Scottie Scheffler, towards his functional swing plane between P4 and P5.5 or P5.8. And then the club head is behind his hands. So between now, as he releases the club head, so the club head gets closer to the ball target line between P5.5 and P6.3, notice the motion of the club. It's on the functional swing plane. You can't afford to tip it over the plane, and you don't want to drop it under. So you don't want to have a club shaft steepening motion or a club shaft shallow in motion once you've reached the functional swing plane like Scottie Scheffler. So he starts to uncock his lead wrist, as I'm demonstrating, and he supinates it a bit so that it moves onto the functional swing plane, which is a curved plane represented by a plane board. So watch this. he does this, right? Now, what is this arm doing? At this point, I said to you, he had to be supinated. So what has to happen, I'll do it from the face-on view. So here you're at P6.5 like Scottie Scheffler. And now he's starting to uncock, and now he's getting towards, let's say, P6.3. If his trail palm has to remain parallel to his lead palm across the club handle, how does he do that? Right? I'll ask you this question. I'm going to do it now without a golf club. First of all, I would encourage you to duplicate what I've done with a golf club, and then picture it without a golf club. So here you are at P5.5. Now you're starting to uncock your lead wrist to release the club. And there's a small amount of supination, and you could picture the functional swing plane. And so you should, through your imagination, picture the club shaft motion onto the functional swing plane. Then the challenge to you is the following. Get this trail palm parallel to that one. And I'm saying, could you do it? So you're here just at P6, like Scottie Scheffler. Could you do it by doing the technique that Sean Webb said? Internally rotate your arm like this. So watch. Wham! My palms are like 90 degrees away, relative to each other. That's impossible. You would never be able to get the palms parallel by doing this motion. I believe the only biomechanical way to go from here, where Scottie Scheffler was at P6, to say P6.3 or P6.5, is to keep your antecubital fossa facing the ball target line, keep your upper arm neutral, and keep your trail forearm supinated, like that. In other words, I believe it's impossible to do that if you're a lead arm swinger. And I believe that Scottie Scheffler and the majority of professional golfers are lead arm swingers. So this is mind-boggling to me, this idea that you could move the trail arm and forearm in this manner, in the way that Sean Webb and Mark Renader are stating. Now, there was another thing that I found extremely strange in their video. So Mark Renader demonstrated something which he said he got from Brian Manzella. And he thinks very highly of this move. He said, when you here, you're eventually going to end up looking like this. And he said, you have 1/8 of a second to complete this motion. So I'll do it from here. So you're here, and he said, as you go down in lay downswing through impact, you have to rotate it like that. And to me, that's nonsensical. Who said that you have to rotate it like that? Let's consider what a professional golfer like Scottie Scheffler is really doing between here, say P5.5 and impact. I'm just going to demonstrate with the lead arm. He starts to uncock his lead wrist. Then, as it progresses, he supinates it so that it comes into impact like this, with a bit of forward shaft lean and with a square club face, right? And then after impact, he looks like that, right? He just continues swinging. Where in this motion is there any kind of rotation where, like Mark Renader says? I think it never happens between P5.5 and say P7.2. Now, after P7.4, a significant number of professional golfers prefer to do this. So they come P7.4, it still hasn't turned over, but from here they do this motion which is called the release swivel action, and if you do that, You can swivel the club shaft behind your back like that and finish like that. Very desirable and comfortable. But this motion, where you do this, happens well beyond impact. When I think of the golf swing, I'm mainly thinking of what are you doing, say, from here to about P7.4, like this. And if you're a lead arm swinger, you're doing what I'm demonstrating. You move your lead arm. You uncock it so that you release the club. If you've got a weak or neutral lead hand grip, there's going to be a certain amount of lead forearm supination happening. And you get to here, if you're a drive holder, the club will still be in line with your lead arm. If you use, like Scottie Scheffler, a flip-in subtype of non-drive hold release action, the club shaft will be minimally bypassed your lead arm at this time period, 7.2. But in no time period between P5.5 and 7.2 are things rolling over like this. So this motion makes no sense to me at all. I think that what you have to do is you have to perfect your lead arm motion. And if you're using your trail arm in a synergistic manner, a helpful manner to help you perform the golf swing with greater efficiency and fluidity, this is the motion. It looks like stone skipping. Now, Mike Renato says that's terrible. And they do this ridiculous demonstration. So they said, if you're a stone skipper, you're going to go through impact like this. And they say, you can't get a square face, you're releasing. But that's not what Scottie Scheffler is doing. Although he's doing a gentle stone skipping motion here, it's subservient to the motion of his lead arm. Now, I said to you, and I forgot to mention this, so I'll bring it up now, that Scottie Scheffler's lead hand at P5.5 is no closer to the target than it was at P4. And he's got a U-shaped motion. Watch this. I can't demonstrate because I don't have the flexibility to quite demonstrate it, but picture that. Notice here at P5.5, my lead hand is outside my trail thigh. To make that possible, I have to have my trail arm like this, not like this, because like that. So that's another useful function of performing the golf swing in this manner, that it feels like stone skipping, so that it helps you to make your hand arc path more U-shaped. If you came here and you started to do like Sean Webb says, like this, it's completely changes your hand arc path. I mean, unless, I guess they could come in from the inside and do it like this somehow. But I didn't see that. I mean, I just see this motion from here. It's a stone skipping motion, but it's not a throw. It's not intended to propel the club shaft faster. It's subservient to help the lead arm move with greater fluidity and efficiency. The other thing I pointed out to you, that Scottie Scheffler had an intact left forearm flying wedge and a geometrically flat left wrist all the way from P4 to P5.5, P6. Then when he releases the club, the flying wedge is intact. So during this entire motion from P5.5, as his club's on the functional swing plane, his club shaft, as it moves in perfect synchrony with his lead lower forearm, like that, right? And I believe this is all controlled by the lead arm. And the only way the trail arm could possibly move where your trail palm remains parallel to the lead palm is with a stone skipping motion. But when I think of the stone skip in motion, I don't think of it as a throw. Because if you threw it actively, you would move your hands through impact much too fast, and you come into impact with too much forward shaft in an open face. So, as I said, my entire mental picture of a professional golf swing is this. It's a lead arm swing in action, like Scottie Scheffler demonstrates it, like this. But you have to do this motion. I cannot conceive of this motion. Now, I've looked at a lot of golf swings, and I still can't find any professional golfer who looks like this. Here he is at P6. I can still see his antecubital fossa. And Sean Webb says you've got to internally rotate your arm so you come into impact looking like that. I can't see the antecubital fossa anymore. I can only see the back of the forearm. I can't see the front of the forearm. The trail palm's facing the ground, while I think the trail palm has to be facing partially upwards, skywards, like this. This is what I see. I don't see this. So am I missing something? If Sean Webb and Mike Grenada say that this is the way to perform a golf swing, and they say all professional golfers are doing it, they should be able to present us with 10 to 20 professional golfers who show this motion. And I can't find one. So I'm going to ask you as a viewer, do you know of any? I mean, I can't imagine Mike Grenada and Sean Webb responding to my request for 10 to 20 examples of professional golfers doing it. But can you as a viewer present me with some examples? I would love to see it because I have not found them. And if it's happening, I want to understand how it's possible that it's happening. So I titled this video as saying that the AMG instructors have lost their way. And what I mean by that is that if I look back in their past, they did many videos where they demonstrated a lead arm swing in action. And in all those videos, their trail arm moved this way. Now, all of a sudden, they're saying it's got to move this way. And I'm saying, why? Where did they come up with this new idea? And how do they justify it? And most importantly, how do you reconcile it with what you said in the past? So I'll give you an example. If you're a religious person, whether you're a Christian or you belong to some variant of the Islamic faith, or you're a Jewish person, believes in the Jewish religion, there's one thing that defines you, and that is you're a theist. You believe in God. Now, there's a subset of human beings who are atheists, who don't believe in God and don't have any religious faith. What I'm saying is you can't be a theist and an atheist at the same time. And this is what puzzles me about the AMG instructors, is they seem to, in some videos, harbor one opinion about the release, and in another video, particularly the latest ones, they've come up with this new one. I can't understand it. If someone can explain to me why they've shifted their opinion on the motion of the trail arm, I would love to hear this explanation. The only thing I can think of is that when they demonstrate a lead arm action, then they do what I believe all professional golfers are doing, like that. When they forget about the lead arm and they just concentrate on the trail arm motion, then they start to come up with ideas like this. If there's another explanation for this dichotomy in their thinking and their presentations, why they have this opposite opinions, please educate me. I would love to learn as to why they have these opposite opinions. Finally, as I always say at the end of my videos, I'm very opinionated. I have biased opinions, but I'm willing to change my opinions if you can criticize me with an argument, a counter-argument, that shows that my opinions are wrong-headed or misplaced or misrepresents reality, if you can, I would love to see some serious criticism presented in the comment section of my video. And if the criticism is both serious and well-intentioned, and particularly if it's detailed, show me that I'm wrong, that professional golfers are actually doing this, I will produce yet another episode where I will analyze that evidence, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But so far, I'm very indoctrinated with the belief that most professional golfers like Scottie Scheffler, Tiger Woods, Will Zalatoris, Justin Thomas, Justin Rose, Adam Scott are all lead arm swingers. And in every one of their examples, this is how they trail forearm moves. Well, I'm going to stop presenting my opinions and stop the recording.